Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the garage. Peter Clayton's behind the camera, making himself comfortable. Do you know, Pete, that chair that you're sitting in?
Yes.
I paid. Let me think. I paid 2 shillings for that chair.
Did you?
Yeah. It was Gene Mann's chair. I had to have it redone because I think he did a lot more sitting than selling. He was the sales director of 2GB for years and years. And 2GB, when it was in Phillip Street, had an abundance of all this wonderful old-fashioned furniture. Old-fashioned chairs and desks and filing cabinets and things. And when they moved off to the new building, which was very nice and very schmick and, properly air-conditioned and all those other things, they literally sold everything to the staff. And I was as poor as a church mouse, so I couldn't buy very much. But I bought that chair. And when I got to Adelaide, I've carted it around the country with me for years. I love that chair. It's a swivel chair, an old-fashioned office swivel chair. And I had it reupholstered and polished. And it's one of my favourite things you're sitting on, Pete.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to.
No, look.
It's a little bit noisy, mind you, when I stand up.
That's
a bit,
character. Old-fashioned office swivel chairs always creak and groan. They wouldn't be the real deal if they didn't. Anyway, I hope you're well. Another day closer to Christmas and the mad panic and whatnot that leads up to all of that. I haven't done any Christmas shopping. Have you, Pete?
No.
No, nothing. I don't even know where to start. I'll put it off till the last minute. Where do we start with the day? I was thinking, driving through the city, I don't know about your city because you could be looking at this in any country in the world. And after the pandemic, I'm not sure that any city is all that different. Not as many people, not as much activity. You can sort of see the cafes and the lunch rooms, the little lunch and bar places that they have, all kind of very slowly going broke. There just aren't the people, not the floor traffic, the through movement of people. I don't know where cities are going. Could be a whole subject for discussion, couldn't it? Whether these big cities should be turned into more places of residential accommodation than office accommodation, I don't know. But as you would know, the trade union movement have had an enormous share of the superannuation business, which was, of course, the brainchild and the setting up of one Paul Keating. And the industry funds have benefited enormously through that initiative, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a very good initiative. My argument with it would be, as Gary Morgan was saying to me on Friday, it should be that we should have access to our superannuation to provide us with the ability to buy a home, which will become the greatest asset, far greater than anything in terms of a return that your industry or your superannuation general fund could produce. I agree with Gary on that. Now, if anyone was on the ball, however, he would look at just how little industrial disputation occurs on building sites that are industry super fund investments. Funny about that. Very funny. But as more than half the city office space is, they tell me, vacant, I wonder just how these funds are going to get a return in the end for their members, and how they will explain at the end of the day that the cupboard is bare. I mean, the one thing we can all count on is change. And I'm not exactly sure that the superannuation business, or for that matter, the investment business, is all that geared to change. It's all kind of geared to the status quo continuing for as long as possible. Long may the party roll on, I guess. The government has put at risk Australia's security yet again. I'm talking about the granting of 800 temporary visas to Palestinians. Now, I hate to kind of paint everyone with the same brush, but when you're acting in the best interests of an entire country, it becomes very difficult to do otherwise. It's a broad brush with which a government paints policy and implements it. All the normal checks on these people were made, says the government. All the normal checks. Not good enough, because these are not normal times. Senator Wong, Foreign Affairs Minister, these are extraordinary times, and these people are coming from an extraordinary place. Nothing normal. Senator Wong pointed out on the weekend that ASIO had done all the checks, which would be, I'm sorry, Senator, sorry, totally useless. Well, perhaps not totally useless, but useless. The Internal Security Agency would know very little about Gaza. Sorry, you would need a team of ASIS agents. Now, these are the guys who are our international overseas spies. You would need a team of ASIS agents on the ground in the Middle East for 6 months, at least. 800 people with this kind of background? That is a risk we do not need to take. And maybe the media will continue to run a cover story for you. But if any of this goes bad, if any of these people go rogue, it's on your head, or whoever signed off on it. I heard this story on the ABC during the week. The world owes us tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid overtime. This is, of course, the trade union movement speaking, because the trade union movement owns the Labor government. And their policy or motto or credo is least amount of work, most amount of money over the shortest number of hours. That's the mantra, which came up in, I think it was Pete last week when we were talking in the garage about the productivity disaster that we're confronted with here in Australia.
Yes, last week. Yes.
Yeah, we've been going backwards for 40 years. Wealth and production, going backwards 40 years. And that's 40 years we can never catch up with. Lost opportunities. With thanks to Labor, we have gone backwards. Oh, they'll tell you differently. With Labor, you're going to get extra in your pay packet. Disappears, of course, at the supermarket checkout in a flash. At best, we've been standing still at a personal level. Industry's been going backwards. Productivity's been going backwards. But that's, I mean, we probably, to be totally honest, we only have the prosperity that we have today thanks to the mining industry. And the mining industry is pretty much, you know, on the nose as far as the socialists are concerned, for some strange reason. I don't know why. You should speak well of the bridge that carries you over. No, ladies and gentlemen, we have never realised our full potential. While countries like Singapore and China and Taiwan and Korea have powered ahead. I'll just wear these for a second if you don't mind. They have powered ahead. And the ABC, the socialist network, the one owned by we the people, hot-footing it further and further to the left, think that Australian workers have been shortchanged. While Labor and the unions want a feather bed. What we really need is to roll up our sleeves, find our mojo, the work ethic. The boss is not the enemy. The boss is not the enemy. I mean, we all in our working lives run across good people and bad people, but by and large, you know, the boss is not the enemy. He or she is the key. People who bet the farm, put everything on the line, risk it all. I grew up the old-fashioned way. You know, I suppose if you're going to draw up a list of things, you have to be the most valuable person on the team. Most valuable person on the floor. Give more than you get. Try, if you can, to be indispensable. This is what I say to my kids. Never watch the clock. Unless you're given overtime. I have never put my hand up for overtime in my 60 years of work. Be the last to leave. And you know what? As I look back, even with a bung eye, as I look back on my life, it worked. You know how they say less is more? Well, I'm sorry. More is more when it comes to getting and keeping a job. Got any time, Pete?
Yeah, sure.
So how do we find our way forward from what I've just been saying? Probably a good place to start would be the schools.
Exactly.
You've got to have a whole new breed of school teacher who is enthused about the system instead of trying to undermine it and destroy it and sabotage it. This government and its silly green dream, in my humble opinion, I'm just one voter, I think it's got to go. Along with its social experiment and failed personality politics, we need business people. Government, you know, is the biggest business in the country. And at the moment, the people running it are counterproductive. I don't think they've got their hearts in it. The unionists, who, as I understand, have to take an oath to socialism. Now, whether they still do that, I tried to look it up and I really couldn't find. But for years, forever, since the beginning of the Labour Party, every person had to take an oath to socialism, which of course we all know is communism with a smile. If we want that running the country, fine. What we need, of course, is a Lee Kuan Yew, who grew up and grew out of socialism, came to his senses and became one of the world's great leaders. We should put all of this on the table. We have one of the world's richest countries, and the present government want to give our wealth away, just like Whitlam and the Lima Declaration, which I've mentioned to you many times. But there's more to it than just the Lima Declaration and the export of all our manufacturing industry. There's immigration, there's South Pacific, there's the voice, there's any third world aspirant, foreign aid, hell-bent on redistributing our wealth with not a lot of focus on creating it or respecting it either. Cost of living and tax reform are the big issues. We have to establish good management and restore incentive and confidence and a first-class education system which prepares our kids enthusiastically for the 21st and 22nd century. There's a lot to do, ladies and gentlemen. You know, what did the good old RSL say? That the price of freedom is eternal vigilance? Turn your back on that lot in Canberra and I don't know. Let me wish you... Oh, look, I've got something else to show you today. Now, have we got that, Pete?
Yes, we have.
It is from that university, which I've forgotten the name of.
It's Prague or Prague.
Progo. It's a name like that. I get people who send me, and it's not just one person, a lot of people send me things from this source, and it's very interesting. They've got various guests who do, I suppose you'd call it a podcast, and they have clearly a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge on particular subjects. I find these very good. This is on the subject of Israel and Palestine. Israel and Palestine. I found it bringing me, and I watched it on my telephone, so it was a very small screen, but I watched it and it brought to me knowledge and wisdom on that subject that I had never seen before. So please, if you've got a second after I give you a few dates, have a look at it, and it'll perhaps help you to understand, help me to understand this current Middle East mess. Happy birthday, or happy wedding anniversary. This is the day that the dog on the tucker box statue was unveiled by the then Prime Minister Joseph Lyons near Gundagai, New South Wales. What is it? What's the song? 5 miles?
5 miles from Gundagai.
5 miles from Gundagai. The dog on the tucker box. Still there. John Lennon's last public appearance at Elton John's Madison Square Garden concert in New York. The two performed 3 songs. Whatever Gets You Through the Night was one. I Saw Her Standing There, good song. And Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which I've never understood. But that was this day in 1974. Wouldn't it be interesting if you, in life, if you had that sort of moment of understanding that, hey, this is the last time I will ever stand in front of an audience. This is the last song I will ever sing. How much more differently would we do it? Probably best we don't know. I think. Dwight Davis died. He's the guy who came up with the Davis Cup. Tennis great, 1945. Oh, yeah, the Air New Zealand Flight 901 smashed into the side of Mount Erebus in Antarctica. All 257 passengers and crew died. It was a DC-10, which wasn't actually the luckiest aeroplane that ever flew, I can tell you. I think they only use them now. You see them occasionally. They use them for carting goods and freight. It was on a sightseeing tour when it plunged into the slopes of the 4,000-metre snow-capped volcano. It was 1979, and this was the day. And that changed everything, because I remember we took a whole bunch of listeners to, I've told you the story before, but years ago, we took a whole bunch of listeners and readers of the old newspaper, whole jumbo jet full of people, from Adelaide to Antarctica, did the same Antarctic adventure. And back then, because this was about 2-3 days before the Air New Zealand crash, the Jumbo, which is a huge aeroplane, you look at the thing and you just wonder how in God's name it stays up there in the air, but somehow, magically, it does. The pilot took it down to the usual level, sightseeing level, which was 500 feet above the ice. And I swear to you, you could see the penguins and the seals. You could just about look them in the eye. But if a lot goes wrong at 500 feet, whatever that is in meters, well, the aviation world always work on metric anyway. No, imperial, it's always feet. Anyway, 500 feet. At 500 feet, there's not a lot you can do. But I remember that experience. It was fantastic. Very, very interesting. What else can I tell you? Washington Irving died. He was the guy who wrote Rip Van Winkle. That was in 1859. Dr. James Naismith, who invented basketball. He died on this day in 1920. Is it 20? Wretched eye. 1939, I'm sorry. Avery Corman, born in New York City. author of Kramer versus Kramer, 1935. Enid Blyton died. She was 71. 1968 was the year. Randy Newman was born in 1943. Beep Birtles was born. Beep Birtles. If you were having a baby, Pete, would you call a kid Burp?
No.
Or Beep?
Beep.
Beep. Come here, Beep. I'd like you to meet my son, Beep. Beep Burples. Or Birtles. 1948, anyway. Ray Lawler's play, The Summer of the 17th Doll, first produced at the Union Theatre in Melbourne on this day in 1955. Keith Miller, former Australian Test cricketer. 1919, he was born. The Irish political party, Sinn Féin, founded in Dublin on this day in 1905. They've been arguing ever since. Rosalind Russell died in 1976. I might leave it there and throw to you and this little insight into the strange goings-on in the Middle East.
It's brilliant.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, it is very enlightening and very, very true. Wise, all facts and figures, or not, it doesn't burden you with statistics, but it burdens you with facts, and you can verify all of them. Thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. Peter Clayton and I, Jeremy Cordeaux, will be back tomorrow. Believe in yourself, and goodbye for now. Thank you for watching.
If Israel just allowed the Palestinians to have a state of their own, there would be peace in the Middle East, right? That's what you hear from UN ambassadors, European diplomats, and most college professors. But what if I told you that Israel has already offered the Palestinians a state of their own, and not just once, but on 5 separate occasions? Don't believe me? Let's review the record. After the breakup of the Ottoman Empire following World War I, Britain took control of most of the Middle East, including the area that constitutes modern Israel. 17 years later, in 1936, the Arabs rebelled against the British and against their Jewish neighbors. The British formed a task force, the Peel Commission, to study the cause of the rebellion. The commission concluded that the reason for the violence was that 2 peoples, Jews and Arabs, wanted to govern the same land. The answer, the Peel Commission concluded, would be to create 2 independent states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. A 2-state solution. The suggested split was heavily in favor of the Arabs. The British offered them 80% of the disputed territory, the Jews the remaining 20%. Yet, despite the tiny size of their proposed state, the Jews voted to accept this offer. But the Arabs rejected it and resumed their violent rebellion. Rejection number 1. 10 years later, in 1947, the British asked the United Nations to find a new solution to the continuing tensions. Like the Peel Commission, the UN decided that the best way to resolve the conflict was to divide the land. In November 1947, the UN voted to create 2 states. Again, the Jews accepted the offer, and again, the Arabs rejected it. Only this time, they did so by launching an all-out war. Rejection number 2. Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria joined the conflict. But they failed. Israel won the war and got on with the business of building a new nation. Most of the land set aside by the UN for an Arab state, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, became occupied territory. Occupied not by Israel, but by Jordan. 20 years later, in 1967, the Arabs, led this time by Egypt and joined by Syria and Jordan, once again sought to destroy the Jewish state. The 1967 conflict, known as the 6-Day War, ended in a stunning victory for Israel. Jerusalem and the West Bank, as well as the area known as the Gaza Strip, fell into Israel's hands. The government split over what to do with this new territory. Half wanted to return the West Bank to Jordan and Gaza to Egypt in exchange for peace. The other half wanted to give it to the region's Arabs, who had begun referring to themselves as the Palestinians, in the hope that they would ultimately build their own state there. Neither initiative got very far. A few months later, the Arab League met in Sudan and issued its infamous 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. Again, a two-state solution was dismissed by the Arabs, making this rejection number 3. In 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak met at Camp David with Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat to conclude a new two-state plan. Barak offered Arafat a Palestinian state in all of Gaza and 94% of the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as its capital. But the Palestinian leader rejected the offer. In the words of U.S. President Bill Clinton, Arafat was here 14 days and said no to everything. Instead, the Palestinians launched a bloody wave of suicide bombings that killed over 1,000 Israelis and maimed thousands more on buses, in wedding halls, and in pizza parlors. Rejection number 4. In 2008, Israel tried yet again. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert went even further than Ehud Barak had, expanding the peace offer to include additional land to sweeten the deal. Like his predecessor, the new Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, turned the deal down. Rejection number 5. In between these last two Israeli offers, Israel unilaterally left Gaza, giving the Palestinians complete control there. Instead of developing this territory for the good of its citizens, the Palestinians turned Gaza into a terrorist base from which they have fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Each time Israel has agreed to a Palestinian state, the Palestinians have rejected the offer, often violently. So if you're interested in peace in the Middle East, maybe the answer is not to pressure Israel to make yet another offer of a state to the Palestinians. Maybe the answer is to pressure the Palestinians to finally accept the existence of a Jewish state. I'm David Bragg, Executive Director of the Maccabee Task Force for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here. To help keep our videos free, donate here.